everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead, and welcome to episode 281. You've finished a project, now what? One of the things that you should do first if you finish a project is celebrate. I turned in a book manuscript 2 days ago, and one of the ways that I celebrated was by taking a nap, which was amazing. And I also celebrated by just taking the next day off and not doing anything else, along with going out with some friends. So, lots of things that you can do to celebrate. One of the things that you might decide that you want to do is tell people about your project, or you might just want to put your laptop away and not do anything for a couple of days. One of the things that I know is part of celebration that I'm doing right now, and we're about 4 days out from me turning it in. One of the things that I know that I'm starting to think about is that during the time when I was working on the project, I wasn't super great about taking care of physical health because I was sitting at my desk writing all the time. So, one of the other ways I'm going to celebrate is just, get some really good food and make sure that I'm getting out for a walk and just getting outside for a little bit. But yes, celebrating once you finish a project, the next thing shouldn't be to move immediately into another project. At least take 24 hours off to enjoy the moment, to enjoy completion, since it takes a long time to complete writing projects. Another thing that was really helpful for me is to make closing notes. And closing notes are something that I started doing a couple projects ago when I realized that after turning in a book, sometimes there were many things that I just ran out of time to do, or they were ideas for other projects, or they were ideas about what to tackle once I got the page proofs back. But I don't want to lose any of that information, and I'm going to shift to another project. So one of the places where I keep my closing notes is in my online notebook called Penzu. I've talked about Penzu so many times on this podcast. Penzu. It's a free online notebook. And if you're watching it on YouTube, you can see an example of what were some closing notes for a book that I just completed about sabbaticals. But there were a couple things. So, for example, when I turned in my full manuscript, I just had screenshots of a couple things because this is not the point where I'm turning in the final figures where they're formatted correctly. But I know when I get those proofs back and or the pages back and I have to make page proofs, I will have to actually use the correct files. And I know I renamed some of my figures different numbers because I changed my mind and added one at the last minute. There's no way when I get this manuscript back in a couple of months that I'm going to remember all that. So I put that in there. I know that there was something else I really wanted to do about some call out boxes, but I couldn't figure out a good way to do it. And I was at the point where the manuscript needed to be turned in. So it's something that would just be a paragraph, but I really don't know where I want to put it. And so I just wrote a note so that way I'm sure that I will make sure I get it in next time. I also found a source after I turned it in that was great. So I just had a note, next time around, see if there's a spot to work it in. I know I have a few references that I accidentally left out. They're not going to make it won't be a big deal this time that they're not in there just on the references page, but they do need to be in there at the end. I have to do an author questionnaire, which wasn't due this time, but will be. And then also just submitting the portal, like making sure I'm submitting a manuscript. But then I also found a couple of themes that I just want to double check when I get it back and I'm looking at it with fresh eyes. There was an idea about an expert learner during a sabbatical, and I know I talked about it, but one thing I don't know is if it showed up in other places in the manuscript. I think it did, but I want to make sure. So just things like that are all in my closing notes. So if you're finishing a project, whether it's something really small like a conference presentation or something bigger like a book, usually there are those kinds of ideas that because projects are never really finished, that there are things that you could do. Other things to look at would be any ideas you had in the project that don't fit there but might fit somewhere else. I didn't have any this time, but usually in projects, I will have one or two things that I couldn't get in this manuscript but are good ideas for the next one. So closing notes is number two. All right, here's another one. Close but save your tabs. And here's what I mean by that. Most of the time when I'm working on a writing project, I have a bunch of tabs open. So I might have Google Scholar open because I'm looking up a source. I might have a PDF of an article open. I might have the manuscript open. I might have the formatting requirements open. But some of those tabs are sources that I looked up in the moment, and I want to make sure that I have them. So one of the things that I did, because I probably had 50 tabs open, I started closing tabs one by one. Most of, some of them were not related to the project, but most of them were. And so where I ended up doing this, and if you're on YouTube, you can see this, but just in the regular old bookmarks spot in Google, I just made a folder called sabbatical books. And every time I came across an article or something that was part of that book, I just click the little star in Google, and then I could select what folder it went to, and it went in my sabbatical book. So just looking at the screenshot that I have posted up on YouTube, I can see already I've got, I don't know, like 40, something like 40 links in there. But this way, I don't have to go hunting again when I get the manuscript back and I know I have to do that reference work. So it's worth closing the tabs and saving them and not just doing a general bookmark, but actually taking the time to make a quick folder for bookmarks. So that way, at least you know when you come back and you're like, I don't know what that footnote was for, you have someplace to look. Number four, save project bits. So this is something where there are little pieces of your project that for some reason or another, they didn't get in the final version, or you're not sure if you're ever going to use them. And so in my case, this was all the references that I ended up getting kind of near the last minute. And I realized, oh, I didn't put those in my works or on my references page. So there were about 10 of them. So I did format them correctly, and then I dropped them in the bottom of my closing note in Penzu. So at the very bottom, in the closing notes, I even have a note to say, you already formatted these references. Don't forget to add them. They're just at the bottom. So it'd be very easy for me to go back and copy and paste. So that's another thing I could give as like a gift to my future self. Finally, looking at ahead to what's your next project. One of the things that we're doing right now at Defend, Publish, and Lead is our summer accountability group. So if you did not get in on it and you want to join us, it's only $25 for the whole summer. We meet every Monday and we do record sessions if you can't make it. And you can also email during the week to get support and accountability. And we also do a lot of troubleshooting and sharing out. But one of the things we're doing is using a summer accountability tracker. And it's a spot where you can look at from one project to the next how you're going to use your summertime. So for this one, we want to look at what's your next project. And for me, I mentioned in the summer, I am only working on two writing projects. One was the book, but the second one was an article that is one that I've put off year after year. And I just decided I'm either doing it this summer or it's going away. So that is going to be my official next project. But I do have one smaller one in between. So I know my answer for this one is a presentation that I am giving for the Textbook and Academic Authors Association. Most of you know that listen to this podcast, they're our one and only sponsor. And I'm actually doing a session on it's a mid-career writing lab for veteran academics. And what TAA is doing this summer is they're doing a 2-day institute with these writing labs where you actually can go to class and get some writing skills. And it's a really great, I think, a really great effort because I haven't seen anything like this where an organization is supporting scholarly writing in a way that you can go and be a learner. So I encourage everybody to check it out. It's called the Textbook and Academic Authors Association. And if you go to events, you will find their Summer Institute. If you do decide to register for it, it's very cheap already, but if you want, you can get a discount from us. So you use capital D, capital P 26 to get a discount. And at least in my lab, one of the things that we're going to do is look at what happens when you're mid-career, you have more administration, you have more mentorship. What can you do to support yourself to keep projects moving through your pipeline? So it'll be really cool. I'm excited about it. And we've actually had other guests on our podcast about the learning labs for textbooks and some other pieces. So I'll link to those episodes in our show notes, but I encourage you to check out our TAA Summer Institute because I think that'll be really cool to attend. But also just thinking ahead for a next project, that lab for me is going to happen in mid-June. And then from that point on, I will be working on I sometimes call it a yucky writing project because I don't want to do that. So stay tuned for a future episode about that because this is something where I know a lot of us are sitting around with half-finished writing projects that nobody wants to do. So I'm going to do something with that. I'll probably put some podcast episodes out and I might even do a webinar, like a free webinar for us this summer because this is something that so many academics have, and we just need to decide, are we doing this project or are we not doing it? So in my case, I thought I would walk through some strategies about how I'm doing it to make it happen. So hopefully this helps, and happy writing this week.